We are recording. All right, let's get started. Well, everybody so far in this event knows me, but I am Kimber Sider. I am the artistic director of the Guelph Film Festival, and welcome to the 2020 Guelph Film Festival online edition. So welcome to the Zoom live event, The Whale and the Raven, Eco-Justice in British Columbia. First, we want to start by acknowledging that the Guelph Film Festival takes place on the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe peoples, specifically the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We stand on Treaty 3, or Between the Lakes Purchase territory, and this year's online festival ranges across Ontario, which includes at least 46 recognized treaties, and there's more information on how to learn about what treaty land you're on if you go to our website, and there's lots of links there under our land acknowledgement. Land acknowledgements, though, are nowhere near enough. They're important, but they're only the first steps in the road to awareness, education, truth, and reconciliation. So at the GFF, one of our actions on this road is that we incorporate Indigenous voices, stories, and knowledge in our programming by showcasing documentaries that have Indigenous people in key creative roles and in control of their own storytelling or narrative sovereignty, and sort of trying to follow the guidelines of the Indigenous Screen Office. So to this end, please make sure that you are checking out our Indigenous made shorts, which you can find on the platform. So tonight with this conversation, so how this is going to work, the first chunk of the evening will be a conversation with whale researcher and film subject Janie WRay and Gitga'at Guardian and film subject Nicole Robinson. So throughout the discussion, the community can send in messages by using the chat function. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat box. If you can't see it right now, just hover your mouse over the screen and that will come up. If you click on it, you'll see a 2, and right now it's most likely set to everyone. So if you have a question, if you change that to question moderator, Nathan will collect your questions as they come in. And then towards the end of the conversation, we'll move on to those questions. And so we're doing it this way just so people aren't getting distracted with lots of questions coming in through the chat as we're talking, and then allows us to kind of stay focused and then focus in on those questions further in. So that's generally how that's working. If you have any questions throughout, shoot Nathan a message, who is the question moderator tonight. And yeah, we can get started. So thank you all for being here and joining us. Normally I would pass this off, but I am moderating tonight in my other hat as an eco-critical scholar and human animal scholar. So I'm not passing it off to anyone except me. So Janie and Nicole, thank you so much for being with us. And we're gonna let you both introduce yourself. So Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, I'm Nicole Robinson. I work for the Guardian Watchman program out of Hartley Bay, BC. I've been doing whale research for 7 years, I'm gonna say, with Janie. I met Janie 7 years ago and had an incredible interest in whales and followed her lead, and she's been mentoring me since.
I think you've been mentoring me, but okay. Thank you, Nicole. I'm Janie WRay, and I've been researching whales since 1996. And that path took me to Hartley Bay, to Gitga'at territory, where we founded the North Coast Cetacean Society and built a whale research station in Gitga'at territory. And there's been a lot of transitions since that happened. Founded BC Whales, and just recently became the science director for Orca Lab, which is also exciting. And yeah, following the passion of whales for the rest of my life. Yeah.
That's great. Can you actually just maybe off the top, Janie, speak a little bit about like what BC Whales does versus Orca Lab, or how they're connected, or their different kind of focuses?
Yeah, they are a little bit different. So BC Whales is still focused more in Gitga'at territory. but we also started to reach out to other areas. So I started at Orchid Lab in 1996 as an intern, so as a student when I first left university, and just over the last couple of years started reaching out to them and trying to develop a partnership with Orchid Lab and other First Nation communities along the coast, mainly because these whales are traveling up and down the coast. So it only makes sense to connect with other researchers and other First Nation communities so that as a whole, we can have a better understanding of where these whales are going, who they're traveling with, what they're doing, and how we can protect them.
Great. Definitely important initiatives. So along the lines of focusing on the documentary, Janie, you've been working with the acoustic dialects of Wales for over 20 years across kind of many parts of BC and down the coast. What can you tell us about your research with hydrophones, or what's the most interesting things you've sort of learned about whale behavior or understandings with that research?
Yeah, well, that actually also goes to these partnerships that we've been developing. So we've been listening to whales in around Nicole's home in Hartley Bay, Gitga'at territory for 20 years now. But we also started putting hydrophones in other locations. So we started a project called the BC-wide Network of Hydrophones, working with other organizations. So now we're actually listening to the entire coast of British Columbia, all the way down from Victoria into the Johnson Strait area, Central Coast, and then up near Hartley Bay. So that's opening up a whole window, an acoustic window into the whole coast. And what's really interesting about that is that there's areas along the coast where it's really, really quiet, and all you listen to are whales, and that would be Gitga'at territory. And then down where I am right now, which is near Alert Bay or Vancouver Island, though you're listening to whales, you're listening to a lot of boat noise. So it's pretty interesting to listen to whales in these different areas and understand how different they are for whales up and down the coast. And, you know, I have to say that it's one thing to see whales on the surface, and it's a beautiful experience. But when you see whales and you listen to whales, it completes the picture. That's when you really start to understand how connected they are to this marine environment, and also how little we really know about these whales. Yeah.
What sort of things are you kind of discovering within this research about the whales, and like what are you listening for?
Well, one of the first things we recognized, and this was quite a few years ago, which I think is really interesting when it comes to resident orcas, is that every family actually has their own dialect, and that they learn that dialect from their mother, and that's been passed on from generation to generation. And what you'll have is a group of families that belong to what's called a pod, and then you have a number of pods that belong to a clan. And each one of those clans actually has their own language. And I can see Nicole smiling because I know what she's thinking about. And what's really fascinating, and I'm not going to finish it, Nicole, because I'm going to leave that for you. What's really fascinating is that what we now know is that when they mate, because they stay in their family, so this family stays together for their entire life. Sons never leave their mother, right? So it's pretty interesting. And so, of course, the big question is, well, what about mating? What about, you know, because obviously they're having lots of calves year after year. And we realized that vocally, you know, they all have this different language, is that when it comes to mating, they will only mate with a whale that doesn't speak their language. In other words, they only mate outside of their clan. And I'll just, Nicole, maybe you can speak to that a little more.
Okay, so I know what Janie's getting at. So through watching Janie and learning about the research from the marine mammal observers and just researching it and listening and everything throughout the years, the one thing I've realized and discovered is that the northern resident orcas are very similar to the Northern First Nations people. So I've made a lot of comparisons. Northern resident orcas, and well, the orcas are matrilineal society, and we as First Nations here in the North Coast, the Tsimshian, we are also a matrilineal society. We never go very far from our families. We always seem to stay close to mom or grandma. Grandma's in charge of the pods the same way in our culture, our ways and everything. Grandma is up top there, and she's the teacher to all of us, and she passes it down. Orcas share foods. We share a lot of our foods. There's just a lot of similarities. We, in our culture, one of our things is that we don't, we have 4 clans in our clan system: the killer whale, the raven, the eagle, and the wolf. And we are not, in our culture, it is tradition that we do not mate within our own clan system either. That our blood runs through our mothers, and we follow our mothers in our clan system. So I'm a raven, I'm Ganheta, and I follow my mother, who follows her mother, and so on. And so we don't go, we feel the blood runs through mothers' families like the orca. So we don't mate or find a mate within our own clan system either. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Like when we first had that conversation, it was like, wow, you know, like that's just incredible. So that's with an orca. I think that's what personally for me, what out of everything that we've learned so far, it's that family connection that that I have so much respect for, actually, and how they, you know, with orca, I believe if they were to speak, let's say English, the language we're speaking today, there would be no such word as I. It would only be we, because that's how they work. And I think that's something we could definitely all learn. And yeah, I'm just fascinated by that. And then when it comes to humpback whales, oh my gosh, that's endless for me, because they, as much as I have been focused on orca, and that's where my work began when I was first getting into this, but when the humpback started to come back to the coast of BC, they just stole my heart for whatever reason. And it's not that I've gone to the other side, as some people will say, but there's so much that we need to learn about humpback whales. We know quite a bit about orca, but when it comes to humpbacks and the fact that they produce this song year after year, and that song changes year after year, and they're vocally, I mean, their range just amazes me. And it's just so beautiful to listen to. There's so much emotion in their songs when they're singing, and that just gets to my heart. I'm losing my voice a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I could just go on and on. But on top of just putting that together, it's how they are not only connected to each other, they're so highly intelligent. I mean, we're just beginning to understand how intelligent they are, but how connected they are to their environment. It's just a connection that when you're on the water or even on land and you get to watch how they move so perfectly through their environment, it's really something. It's really something to observe, and I would like everyone to actually have that experience in the wild. But also how vulnerable they are now in that environment. That's a pretty big thing.
For sure, yeah. Like that definitely speaks to a lot of different aspects in there. And I think it starts to explain like your love of humpbacks, which you reference in the documentary as well. And Nicole, in the documentary, it's referenced that you're the orca lady. What is, no?
Well, I'm yeah,
or who do you identify with, or what is, how would you connect things?
My start was with Janie with the humpback whales. So I dove in deep with that, and along the way studied the orca. My man is more geared towards the orca. We do monitor them, we follow them, we know them. I'm with Janie, like I got that's where I veered off to, was with Janie and the humpback whales more than anything over the years. Like I love them all, of course, but yeah, I've worked like the beginning, like asked hundreds of questions from Janie about the humpback whales, started getting to know them, learning the IDs of them, behaviors, watching them, following them, knowing who's around and everything. I have my 2 favorites. I love them all, but I have 2 faves.
What makes them your favorites? Why do they stand out?
The first two I ever ID'd, I went to down to Whale Point and looked in the ID book, and I had my own pictures I took of humpback whale flukes when I learned that's how you know, their fingerprint. And one of the interns looks at me, hands me the book and says, here, kind of find your own whale in there and from your pictures. And I found Jupiter and Costi were the first two I found, so they kind of stayed in my memory and became my two favorites, so I can spot them by sight. It was actually funny. This season I was out on the boat with a bunch of people and Costi fluked, and I'm like, oh, there's Costi, and the guy's looking at me, he's like, how the heck do you know? And I'm like, that's like a favorite whale.
That's my whale.
Yeah.
Nice. That's
yeah, and that's the other thing too. You really begin to because you recognize all these whales, because the same whales are coming back year after year after year. So you're not only watching them grow, but you're also watching the, you know, first time a whale arrives with the calf. And the whales, as far as you know, it's about 10, 15 years old, and it's first calf, right? So you've been seeing it for years without a calf, and all of a sudden she's a mom. And it's like, whoa, it's just so exciting. And you feel as though you're sharing all these events with them. But, you know, the reality is that you're sharing the event with them, and they aren't really understanding that you're sharing that event with them, which is in itself interesting. But in regards to Jupiter, so all this season, Nicole would go on the water, I would go on the water, and the first thing we'd say is, did you see Jupiter? No, I haven't seen Jupiter. So we were both pretty worried, because Jupiter is one of the most resident whales. It's one of the whales we always see in the bubble net feeding group. And, you know, near the end, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe we've lost Jupiter. You know, it's possible. The last survey of the season, which was just like literally 2 weeks ago, went out on the water. I wasn't with Nicole, and this whale fluked about 20 feet away, and I'm taking the picture, and there was an intern on the boat with me, and I just screamed, and she's like looking around because she has no idea. Of course, it was Jupiter, and I just kind of lost my stuff a little bit on the boat. I got a little emotional, right? And I just couldn't wait to get home and tell Nicole that I saw Jupiter, because you become very connected to these whales, right? Yeah, you really do.
For sure. Yeah, I can only imagine spending so much time watching them and learning from them. And yeah, that's amazing. Nicole, can you tell us a bit more about your responsibilities, and as we talked earlier, in terms of being a Gitga'at Guardian, and maybe speak to both the band aspects and the hereditary aspects of that, and what that means?
So through my work with Janie and learning throughout the years, I put a thing forward to the Guardians, and me and my partner got hired, and this is our 6th year of doing it. We spend time out at a cabin for our band, and we work for the part of the Guardian Watchman program. So part of our program is to educate any vessels on the waters, monitor any vessels on the waters in regards to the whales. We do whale-wise talks with them, like the rules and protocols and etiquettes. We also monitor for behaviors. We record like their direction of travel, who they are. We get ID shots. We share a lot of it with Janie and others. We also monitor the orca closely too, especially the orca for vessel traffics of, you know, everybody wants to go see the orcas and travel with them. So we monitor all that and tell them the rules. And yeah. What was the other question? Sorry, my apologies.
Just what it means to be a Gitga'at Guardian, and whether you want to speak to that, both in terms of like the hereditary side and then like your formal kind of position that you were just talking about.
So the Guardian Watchman program was set up to monitor and protect our marine and land resources, and that was created through our band office, through the electoral system, and within our band there, and they hire. Right at the present, we have 6 people working, I believe, 7, 8, maybe more. I'm not sure, but part of the here for the Guardian Watchman program, they go out and do whale surveys also. So they they have a broader area, like a bigger area compared to like Janie and us in the summertime. So they do more land, our marine base in like with a boat, and they travel around and they get numbers of whales and like within the territory, but kind of places we don't get to, kind of places we don't always get to. So they're out there doing that. They also monitor vessel traffic and amongst other things, illegal activities on our waters. They monitor our food sources, like a variety of things.
Mm-hmm. Great. So as what both of you kind of have been seeing with these disruptions in terms of the sound and the boats and the various aspects, how are these different things impacting the whales, and what sort of is the impact kind of more localized just when the boats are in the area? Obviously collisions are a major concern, but are there longer terms effects? How are you seeing these kind of differences in the sound and the boats, and how it's impacting the whale populations?
Yeah, so I think what's going back to what I had said before, like listening to them up and down the coast. So you have the ability to compare that vocal tradition in different locations in some areas like Gitga'at territory where it's extremely quiet versus down here where it's pretty noisy. It's very different. So this year, just to give you a really good example, because of COVID, there was no cruise ships going through here. So normally on a regular basis, you've got cruise ships going up and down, and you could have this beautiful recording, whether it's humpback singing or, different orca families trying to communicate with each other. And all of a sudden it's this massive amount of noise, and generally they go quiet. Now, whether they've gone quiet or we can't hear it because it's being masked because of the noise, that's a question we've been trying to answer, and we are now able to answer that better. What's really incredible is that the amount of orca that showed up here and the amount of humpback singing went from here to here in this particular region, because suddenly the boat noise went like this. Now, you can't just take one season and say, hey, this happened, but if we get a couple more seasons like this, and as well to see if there's a difference when we compare it from last year to this year to next year, I think it gives us a lot of great evidence to say, you know what, there really is an impact from this vessel noise on these whales' ability to, find prey or to communicate with each other. And, when you think about a transient orca, because they're marine mammal hunters, they listen for the sounds of their prey. That's how they find dinner. And so if there's a lot of vessel traffic around them, they actually are not able to locate that prey because they can't hear the prey. And in regards to communication, whales, they can't see they can see underwater, but only at a short distance. So they're using that ability to communicate for miles and miles under the water. That's their way of seeing what's around and who is in the area for them to communicate with. So it's for us, we can just sit back and go, it's pretty obvious that a quiet ocean is a better ocean for whales, but of course you have to prove it, and that's what we are working on at this moment. And I think there's a lot of great evidence that's now coming together to show that, and I'm very, very excited about that. And one thing in Gitga'at territory, what we now have the ability to do is localize. So what that means is that when we have 4 hydrophones set up in an area, so that when a whale vocalizes within those 4 hydrophones, on a map on our computer, a little light pops up, and that's where the whale is. So that if the whale vocalizes again, then we get another little light. So what happens at the end of the season, we actually have all these little whale trails. Like, how you walk through the forest and you can see deer trails or wolf trails. We actually have, these whale trails. So now what we can do is we can take these trails, let's say, and we can overlap that with vessel traffic. And you can see, and I call them trails because what we now realize is that when these whales come in, they'll actually take the exact same route. So it's not like they're just all over the place. They actually travel very specific underwater trails that they've probably been doing for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so now you can take that vessel traffic and take their pathways and overlap that, and you can see where you're going to have a problem. And again, that's a pretty good case to try and at least slow vessels down or look at different times of the day. You know, if some of these tankers are going to come through, well, if they're going to do it, maybe there's a better time of the day or a better time of the year for them to be transiting through areas with such high abundance of whales in the area.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it is very cool.
So like with different whales, like, I mean, obviously like humpback whales and the song and the original CD in the 70s and all of that type of thing, like for them, like I know as you've talked about, like our orcas have this whole dialect and it's, you know, are kind of talking more consistently. Like from a lot of the things I've read about humpback whales, it's so focused on the song and on those aspects. Are they talking more consistently as well? And then song is just one component of it?
Yeah, so that's what's really interesting. So we all thought that humpback whales, they sing, you know, more in the fall and the winter. And then of course what we have is bubble net feeding, and they're very vocal. So there's days when we have humpbacks bubble net feeding all day long. So we're listening to them all day long. And it's the same type of call that's been realizing is that they're also very social. They're very, don't have a lot of understanding of, it's not song, it's not bubble net feeding, but it's very social. And they're repeating some of the same calls. Like, you know what else they're doing? They're, it's amazing. They are imitating orca. So that's the thing about them is that because they are constantly making and producing new sounds and new language all the time. So because they're now listening to these resident orcas all the time when they're coming through, they're picking it up, and so they're starting to imitate it. So when we hear it on the hydrophone at first, we're like, and then we realize, oh, it's a humpback whale, right? So it just kind of shocks you. But anyway, we're now realizing that in different locations up and down the coast, because of these hydrophones, we're getting little areas where they come in, humpback whales, and they're very chatty and they're very social, and it's a whole different catalog of calls we've never heard before. So, you know, it's a whole new project, and I can't speak to it as yet as to what it's all about, but it's very different and very exciting, and it's happening, you know, right here in BC. So, yeah.
Wow.
They're very vocal at certain times of the year. That's what I wanted to say, sorry. But in the summer, when they're, you know, besides the bubble net feeding, they don't seem to be as chatty. But as soon as the day becomes shorter and shorter, they start to vocalize more and more. So, yeah.
Do you want to, like, I know what it is, but would you like to explain what bubble net feeding is for people that may not know?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing about bubble net feeding is it, along this coast anyway, it was mainly happening up around Alaska, and then that behavior is getting passed on. So suddenly a whale showed up in Gitga'at territory, and it bubble net fed with a couple of other whales. And that behavior, we had 9 individuals, and I will describe what it is. But first of all, we had nine. We had 9 individuals, and it was the same whales every year, and only 9 whales that would bubble net feed, you know, in around our area. Now we've got 64. So that behavior is getting passed on, and it's making its way down the coast. It doesn't happen here, but it happens in the central coast and the north coast, and then up towards Alaska. And what it is it's usually, it could be anywhere from 2 or up to, you know, 15, 16 humpback whales. And they work together. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a group of whales. They'll be traveling usually along the shore, and then one after the other, they'll take a dive, and they go down. And as soon as they go down, we start to hear this call. And what's actually happening underwater is they're going to go down, and they get underneath a school of herring. And once they're underneath the school of herring, a number of them start blowing bubbles. And while they're blowing bubbles, they're actually making a circle around, like a circle around the herring ball, which is producing a net. And of course, you know what bubbles do is the bubbles are going to rise up, and it's forcing all that fish up to the surface. But what else is happening is there's one, sometimes 2, but mainly just one whale underneath all of that that's vocalizing and doing this specific call, and that call is literally hurting the herring up into the net. And then this whole thing is coming up to the surface, and it's a massive, the circle is probably like at least 100 meters in diameter in each direction. It's a massive circle of bubbles. And then they come up right through the center of it. And that's when you see these big, massive mouths wide open. So their mouth is wide open, but that mouth is also filled with water, right? Water and fish. And you can see little herring jumping everywhere, trying to, get to get out of the mouth. So imagine these 10 large, massive mouths wide open, and it's in a complete circle. Like it looks like a spiral of clams, these large clams, is how someone else described it once. But as they're closing that massive mouth, they have to get rid of all that water. And they have a gigantic tongue, and then they've got all those baleen plates up top. So as they're closing the mouth, the tongue is going to push all the water out through the baleen. But of course, the baleen is like a filter, and it keeps all the fish in, right? And they can bubble net feed all day long, nonstop. They just go, 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 go. The other thing that's starting to happen up where we are is we've always only had them in groups, but now we actually have single whales that are bubble net feeding. And the other thing that's happening is that we always had this very distinctive bubble net feeding call, but now because so many of these other whales are joining in and trying it out, but they all have their own bubble net feeding call, their own little dialect, let's say, when they're bubble netting. So now we can actually put an acoustic fingerprint with each one of these whales as they're bubble netting. So that's a huge thing for us to be able to do.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Nicole,
it is. It's amazing.
Nicole, have you, like, as a resident of the area and hanging out, with all of the interspecies residents year round, are you noticing differences or things that are standing out, whether due to, changes because of COVID or, just things that you've seen change over the years that you've been doing this work and observing? And
Yes. So this season, albeit short because of COVID, we spent 3 weeks at Finn Island. We also spent some time down at what we call the Renison Cabin, where we normally work in the summer months. So through our work, we gained a relationship with the guy on the coast who attends live strandings, deceased whales or cetaceans, and all that. I have to say, in the last few years, we get calls from him like, oh, there's an entangled whale, there's a deceased whale, or we find get calls about deceased whale, and we're calling him. We had nothing this year.
oh, wow.
Like, that was awesome to not, I have to say, it gets exciting when you attend all these, but at the same time, I'm so happy we did not get a call from him and didn't really talk to him much this summer, because like last year we did for him, we did a necropsy on a minke whale. There was a deceased minke whale, which was due to a killer whale kill, we found out later. But we also have done a necropsy on a deceased whale. It was in the movie. We did one in 2014 with Janie and Herman to attend a deceased whale, which we knew was clearly a ship strike.
Yeah. But
I didn't really hear much this summer of vessel strikes of cetaceans. Not saying it didn't happen, but I didn't hear anything, which is a good thing. So I think that's due to the decrease of ships, especially cruise ships in our area. We had no cruise ships at all in BC waters. So I think that really helped a lot to, it really highlighted of what the impacts of large ships and vessels in our area.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing though that is on the increase up and down the coast, outside of ship strikes, are entanglements. That's a huge, huge issue, and it's an issue that's growing because the population of humpback whales has increased substantially over the last 20 years, and that's something that both Nicole and I are pretty passionate about, because there's the thing about a humpback whale that people may not always realize is that they do actually not feed for half a year. Let's say when they go to migrate to Hawaii or Mexico or Japan, while they're there, they're not feeding. So their body has the ability to go for a very long period of time and not feed. So what that means, if they do get entangled, unfortunately, they will survive for a long time, but they're surviving in a state of agony. So it's a very stressful situation along this coast when it comes to entanglements. Yeah.
Can I just jump in there? I just thought of something. Okay, I lied. We did get a call. So this year, due to the large amount of whales around, there was a commercial fishing opening, and they haven't had openings in our area for some time.
3 years, I
So,
think. Yeah.
so there was an opening, and there's one area where the whales frequented, and we were listening to reports and monitoring on the VHF, and we were out in our vessel near all the openings, the commercial openings, and there was quite a few calls of whales in their nets. And unfortunately, one humpback whale did get caught around a net, and the net was attached to it. By the time we got to the area, the whale dove and never came back up again. So we don't know what happened to it. We monitored for a few days of trying to find this actual whale, because one guy just happened to get a whale fluke shot of it. So hopefully even next year we can keep an eye out for it. So that was the only thing this year that was, but we haven't had a commercial opening for a while. So they even had an area closed down to commercial fishermen, which was amazing. And I was quite happy to hear about that, like that it could happen, and they did it. Like some of the workers who were out monitoring for other reasons, and people nearby made some calls, and they shut the fishery down in that area. Yeah. So that was awesome. But that was like a couple weeks of fishing. So that was the only thing we had to deal with this year, which was good. I mean, not good, but good.
Yeah, that's true.
For sure. There's so much emotion in how both of you talk about whales, and you, in the documentary, you reference a bit for both of you, kind of those first experiences. And of course, happy to hear more about those first experiences that kind of made you passionate about whales. But I'm also curious if, especially on the science side of things, we often like to talk about science as being so objective and distanced from this. I actually, like, as we mentioned before, I teach science undergrads, and those are some of the things that I try and break them out of. But yeah, you obviously kind of, and both of you, even while you're doing this advocacy work and this on the ground research, talk so passionately about whales. And I'm curious about how you see the importance of those emotional connections to this work, to whales, to, you know, environmental advocacy, land advocacy, sovereignty, all of those types of aspects. I'm curious, any of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a topic that comes up at the research center, because we have a lot of younger students that are, you know, that's what their goal is. They want to, you know, be let's call it a whale scientist or a whale biologist or something along those lines. And, you know, there is that line when you, you know, where you've got passion and you have science. And my idea is that years ago, back in the dark ages, you know, you weren't allowed to show any emotion if you were a scientist. You had to stick to the facts and all of this. And, you know, hallelujah, that's not the case anymore. You can actually have passion and you can still do really good science, because the reality is that when you write a paper and that paper is peer reviewed, you do have to stick to the facts and you do have to do it properly. But that doesn't mean that you can't turn around on the other side of that and have a conversation like this and talk from your heart. So you can do both. We're very capable of doing both and doing both properly. And so yeah, that's a big topic for us, because we think it's important for students to have the ability and to be given the permission to do both. If you want to protect whales, you can go on and on about the science. You can read some peer-reviewed paper. You're probably going to bore a lot of people. I hate to say that, you know.
No, academics never do that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. So you can do both, and very well.
It's interesting too to think about that idea too, that we've, you know, trained humans so much to pull back from that. And then especially when you're talking about whales that have these amazing communities and emotional lives, like that idea of not emotionally connecting to it, like, you know, how do you kind of find that way in if you're not exploring that?
Yeah.
Nicole, do you have any thoughts on the importance of the emotional connection for your areas of work and whatnot?
I think mine is majority an emotional connection. I have no former education in this field. I didn't go to school for this. I didn't go to university, college, anything. This is pure hands-on learning and having great teachers, research, everything. But majority, like, I think mine is more a lot emotional connection to our lands, to, I mean, to our waters, to what's there. I mean, it's always been there, and it's funny how for so many years we just never looked at it or seen it, like, to now have a different connection to our oceans. So it is majority emotional based.
Yeah, and just to add to that, another thing that I do see happening, and even working with students, is that a lot of people, I mean, I can't speak for other provinces, but within BC, especially in coastal BC, whether you're going into Gitga'at territory or Heiltsuk or Kitasoo, is that a lot of students are asking for permission to come into these communities to learn from the Indigenous people learn their way of, well, I shouldn't be the one saying it, Nicole, but learning that Indigenous way, how to connect and how to study and how to research and to bring those two methods together. And then I think that's the perfect solution, really. It really is. And I mean, I remember when we first went to Hartley Bay, the amount of things that I learned about our natural environment. And I was really amazed as to how much I didn't know. There's some really great lessons there, and what a privilege to have elders within a community share that knowledge with you. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That there's so much knowledge on both of those sides that it's silly that we get so overly focused on the academy and book learning and all of the things when there's so much knowledge that's often better that's not coming from that standpoint. And
there's nothing like local knowledge. There's really something to be learned from that. And
yeah, for sure. What would both of you say to somebody that doesn't get it, doesn't get the whale love, doesn't get the emotion, doesn't get why we should care? Why should we care about whales, about these ecosystems, about this community? Why should we care that, about what y'all do?
You want to go first, Janie, or?
Well, first of all, I mean, I try not to judge it, because I do. I mean, the first thing is if you do come across that, and you do come across people that we're not all connected to the same things. So you try to have a conversation and you try to find a way in. And for every individual, it's going to be different. But I find asking questions and learning what they are interested in and opening up that communication. But it's very interesting is that when you take that approach, and people become a bit more relaxed and they're not feeling that pressure that they have to believe what you believe, and you find that common denominator, I've often found that through conversation, they actually start to get it because your own passion is picked up by that person, and vice versa in different ways. I mean, I have had people when they listen to someone, because we have these people that come to Finn Island every year through these ecotourism trips. And we had this one girl I was playing, I'll never forget, I was playing some whale calls and she's like, oh God, I don't know how you can listen to that. And it took me by surprise, but I had to not react to it, So I think all you can do is try to, with your passion, is to get them somehow involved in it. And but it's not every person on this planet is going to love whales. They may love something else. I don't know how much you can do about it, but if it depends on the age as well. Like if you've got kids, I think you've got a really good chance. If you've got somebody who's 70 or 80, your chances might be slimmer to bring them over to the other side. Yeah.
What about you, Nicole? Why should people care, or what? Why does this matter, or how do you get them to care?
I always tell everybody, just come see my world. Welcome to my world. But to care, they're here. This is their home. They belong here. We're guests in their home. Like, I love sharing my world with others. And Janie, we're just talking about elders and all that. So throughout the years, like my grandmother's sister, who's now 94, about maybe 5 years ago, we took her out on our boat, and she was raised fearful of whales, like humpback whales in particular. And she said, she was raised and taught that if you go on a certain side of them, they're gonna tip you. And my man's home. That the whales will tip you, and she didn't understand them. And so we were sitting on the boat, and they were bubble net feeding, and we're on the big boat watching them from afar, and I said, oh, look, it just showed its tail. And she's like, just panicked and scared. And I showed her Janie's book of the whale flukes, and I said, well, you see that whale that just showed its tail? This is it in the book right here. And after like maybe about 15 minutes, we're playing the sounds on the hydrophone, letting them listen, because we had a few elders on the boat with us, and we're educating them of what's in our waters that they've never seen or paid attention to before, because throughout years before, they were told to be fearful of these animals, and so we're educating them of why they're there and what they're doing there, and what we've learned of them. And she even started looking at my man and saying, oh, go over there, they're over there. And she's getting all excited to see the tail, to see it in the book, to know that she could say, oh my gosh, I just seen that whale. And it's like, you welcome them into your world, show them what you see, and educate them.
Yeah,
That's lovely.
and I think, Nicole, you picked up on something great there, is that you make them realize that there's a history to this whale, there's a story to this whale. And I think as well, when you talk about orca and how they're connected to family, or you find something that they can relate to, and all of a sudden they become that much more interested. So I think that's great. Or the idea of being able to ID a whale and know the name. Actually, it's not BCX00. That's Smiley, or that's Yoda, or Costi, or Jupiter, and suddenly it becomes more personal, right? I think those steps also help a lot in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. We have a question from the audience from Nicole. If you're comfortable, Nicole, the question is asking if you can speak to more the spiritual, traditional family connections of relating to this relationship with whales, if you're open to talking about it from that perspective.
The spiritual connection to like humpback whales?
I think either. I think it's kind of coming at it from this, this whale clan, more traditional kind of connection of Gitga'at Nation with the whales, if there is one, or if that speaks to anything. If not, that's completely fine.
So with the humpback whales, I think because, like, through my life, because of the whaling in the 50s, I believe it was the 50s. Because of the whaling, there wasn't much whales around, so the humpback whales weren't really talked about through that I knew of growing up. I mean, I remember seeing orca when I was 12, actually, but never talked about the humpback whales until Janie and Herman came, and then started talking more and more about it, and then more and more humpback whales were showing up. And I know there's, through talk with the elders, there was talk about the whaling, but nobody ever really paid attention to it. And so then you got me and my man, who kind of joined with Janie and then started putting it out there to the community, talking more and more about the whales. So more and more stories started coming out of the past, but it wasn't such a big thing. The orca, so the orca have always been a part of our First Nations, history. We've seen pictographs on the rocks depicting orcas or whales. It's part of our clan system. So our clan system, we have four of the clans, and orca is one of them. So they were very much a part of our history. You can go further up we call it up the line, like up the Skeena River, and they don't have an Orca as part of their clan system. Their clan system, albeit similar languages and everything, their clan system is very different from ours. So, you know, our history evolved around Orca. And then, of course, through our learning about the killer whale, like, because my man's a part of the Orca clan, we call it Blackfish. So he's part of the Blackfish clan, and it's, yeah, you very much have a connection to it. And then when we, like I said, through our learnings, we're basically, Janie can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're like kind of the first two from the community who made that leap with, you know, to study as First Nations. And Janie could correct me if I'm wrong again. I believe I'm the only First Nations female on the coast who have studied cetaceans this much. So it's like, it's big. So we now talk to a lot of our First Nations families or relatives who live in different communities, and kind of putting the awareness out there more, you know, like a little more than what Janie puts out there already. So we like add to it. It's like, okay, this is Janie, this is what we do. And through social media and everything, I'm putting a lot of stuff out there. I have a lot of my family and friends of First Nations communities along the coast who have expressed a bigger interest. So I love to see it grow.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, like doing presentations up and down the coast, because there are other coastal First Nation communities, and for Nicole to go into one of those communities is a much stronger message than, let's say, someone like me to go in. It's, or both of us maybe, but it's really nice to have as a what would the word be? But as a, oh my gosh,
like kind of ambassadors for it, like.
Yeah, like I think just to have a First Nations woman come into these other communities for young First Nation girls to see, you know, all of what's out there and all of what you can do if you want to do it. I think it's by example, I think it's just phenomenal, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For any, I mean, it doesn't even have to be First Nations. Personally, I think for any woman to inspire any young woman out there, and I see there's a gentleman on the couch, so I mean, no, you know, anything by that, but it's just for us, you know, I'm a little bit older, so it's really nice for me to see younger women, you know, just there's a lot more out there, and, you know, just the ability to go for it if that's what you want to do, right?
Sure. There's still a lack of representation on all of that stuff across the board. And that's very much in line with what we do. And actually, all of our speakers for this year's festival are kick-ass women from a variety of backgrounds with a variety of knowledges. So,
yeah,
we're all for celebrating that. And
thank you.
and that is a focus of our festival. We also program at least 50% female or female identifying directors and stuff. So yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, all about kick-ass women, you know, sharing their knowledge and leading the way. We should probably start wrapping it up. So I wanted to end with one question for both of you as humpback whale lovers. As we talked about earlier, humpback whale singing gets a lot of focus, and at least, I mean, I feel like most of the books I've read are less emotional and more kind of making or claiming that there's no real understanding for why humpback whales sing, that it's not, and like realizing that it's not mating related, or that's the theory anyways. And I was just curious, with both of your passion for humpback whales, if you have any theories, founded or not, on anything other than lived experience, of why humpback whales sing.
Do you want me to go, or do you want to go, Nicole?
Mine will be simple and short.
Well, then you go first, because mine's not simple.
World, yeah, so my thoughts are that they communicate. They have a connection. It's a worldwide connection. There's no, how do you say it? They're all equal. They're all one. They all communicate. It's all worldwide. They're a species all over the world that connects with no hate.
Yeah, that's true. Mine's a little more, because I have put a lot of thought into why do they sing. That's something that that I ask myself all the time, why are they singing, and why are they changing it, and how are they learning it from each other? Because these are all questions that we don't know the answers to. And is it really only the males that are singing? Because, you know, right now we think it's only the males, and I'm always open to that might just change. You just don't, there's so much that we don't know. I do think that there is perhaps a connection to mating with it. We just aren't quite sure what it is. And the reason that I say that is because when one male starts to sing, and then another male joins that male, and they start to sing, and then another male joins in. So sometimes you get groups of males singing, and then all of a sudden another male comes in, and it's like, no, honey, or no way, sweetie, or whatever. This male is not going to be allowed to sing with these other males. So that makes me think that potentially maybe these 5 whales that are singing together and this other whale that's come along, the reason he's not allowed to join in is because he's not in any way whatsoever related to them. So these 5 might somehow or other have some genetic component that relates them to each other. So they start singing, they're singing together, they're moving around with the song, they're changing the song. And then what these whales will actually do is sometimes 1 or 2 humpback males will then go towards a female. And in some ways they are actually going towards her, and sometimes they will chase her, and there's a bit of a commotion going on. But the outcome is generally that one of these males will actually mate with her. So if you think of it from that point of view, from a completely biological sense, their genes are actually getting passed on. So that's a very unemotional scientific way of looking at it. But there could be something to it just through all the observations that are going on there. And as well, because we always have to ask the question, because, you know, a mother and her calf, they only spend 1 year together, right? So calf leaves mom, and this is going on, going on, going on. So how do they know when they go to mate with the whale that they're not related to that whale? So something within the song, I believe, lets them know who they are or are not related to. And I think that also plays a bit of a role in it. The other thing, it was actually written on the wall at one of our out camps, and I thought this was beautiful, is that whales are singing because they want someone to listen to them. I just thought that says it all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that's probably a great place to end this awesome conversation. Thank you both for joining us so much. We really appreciate your time and all the knowledge and all the work that you're doing, and for making the time to be here with us today, on almost either side of Canada. Good distance away.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening and everything. Yeah. And thanks, Nicole.
Yes. So thank you all. And yes, and thank you all participants. So we will wrap it up there, and everyone have a lovely night. And thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.